Welcome, dreamers, to the edge of moonlight and memory, where silence stretches across the sands of time, and forgotten empires breathed beneath the dust. Tonight, we drift deep into Africa's ancient heart, to a kingdom hidden in shadows, etched not in gold, but in the echoes of lost splendor. The Kingdom of Kush, mysterious, majestic, and long forgotten. Before we embark on this journey through time's soft veil, if these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing to continue these nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow wanderers, from which corner of the world you listen tonight. Let the constellation of kindred souls illuminate the map of mystery as we travel together into the ancient hush of Kush. Close your eyes now. Let the past unravel like incense in the wind, and let the sand speak. Long before the pyramids of Giza were swallowed by the breath of tourists and myth, another kingdom blossomed along the southern curve of the Nile. This was not the Egypt of pharaohs and papyrus, but something older in its silence, something deeper in its shadows. The land where the river bent not toward glory, but toward mystery. Here, in what the ancients would call Nubia, and the modern world forgets beneath modern maps, the Nile flowed like a slow whisper. It meandered past cliffs of ochre and gold, past black rocks that jutted like fossilized sentinels, past hidden tombs buried not to be found, but to be remembered by no one but time. In this realm, known as Kush, the sun did not rise with conquest, but with quiet ceremony. Each morning was a golden veil. Each evening, a hush of reverence. Time moved like a priest here measured, sacred, deliberate. The Kushites built their lives from stone and silence. Their pyramids were narrower than Egypt's, but rose from the earth with a sharper elegance, less boastful, more solemn. These were monuments not to kings who wished to be gods, but to kings who remembered they were only dust. Even their temples felt different. They hummed in the wind, their columns shaped not to impress the sky, but to mirror the ridges of distant mountains, as if earth and architecture were merely reflections of one another. And always, the river watched. The Nile in Kush was not the same Nile as in the north. Here it was, it carved not only valleys, but legacies. It drowned stories and uncovered others, depending on the season, depending on what the gods willed. There were no sprawling cities like Thebes or Memphis here. Instead, there were sacred mounds, hilltop shrines, and royal necropolises nestled into silence. The land breathed history not through stone inscriptions, but through absence, through the spaces between what was remembered and what was lost. And yet, the Kushites had their language, a tongue carved into stone that no one today can read. Meroë script. They called it a script still unbroken, like the lock to a tomb that refuses to surrender its secrets. We gaze at these letters, arranged with care across granite, and we feel time's cruelty. The words are there, the meaning is not. It is like hearing a melody in a dream, but waking without remembering the tune. But perhaps, in silence, the message still sings. Perhaps Kush still speaks not in syllables, but in soil and shadow. Tonight, we begin our descent into this lost kingdom, a land where gods wore lion masks and queens wielded spears, where gold was common and peace was sacred, where history hides not because it vanished, but because it chose to remain undiscovered. Let your breath slow, feel the air grow warm and still. The Nile waits, and Kush remembers. As the night deepens, so too does our path, winding southward along the Nile's trembling ribbon. We arrive at a city half buried in time and sun, Napata, a name whispered across ancient stone and desert breeze. It was once the heart of Kush, the pulsing center of its golden soul. Napata was not a city of noise. No market cries pierced its air. No imperial drums rolled like thunder through its gates. Instead, Napata exhaled silence. Its temples were calm as dusk. Its streets, worn by sand and sandals, led not to chaos but to contemplation. The city rested at the foot of the sacred mountain, Jebel Barkal, the pure mountain. To the ancient Kushites it was more than stone. It was a god's breath made solid, a finger of the divine pressing down upon the land, blessing it with permanence. From its peak, you could see the Nile winding in both directions, vanishing into the dunes and memory. It was here that kings were crowned beneath the gaze of Ahmad, the god of breath and mystery. But in Kush, Amun was not merely inherited from Egypt. He was reborn. Here his presence lived not in grand declarations, but in the wind's slow chant through temple columns, in the shade that clung to the base of the sacred cliff. And here in Napata, women held thrones. The Kandake, the queen mothers, not mere consorts but sovereigns, warriors, priests, diplomats. The world has forgotten them, but the stones remember. Their faces are carved into the temple walls with crowns of serpents and gazes of granite. They do not look at you, they look through you. The Kushite belief in divine right was not limited by gender, nor silenced by conquest. Their queens commanded armies. Their decisions shifted borders. Their names Amanator Shanik Takit whisper like incense through corridors of time. In Napata, gold was not rare. It shimmered in the soil, in river silt, in the jewelry worn by artisans and royalty alike. But here, gold was not greed, it was ritual, melted into shapes of cobras and sun discs. Offered to temples, buried in tombs, not flaunted in courts. Kushite wealth glowed quietly, like moonlight on water. Their art was spare but sacred, their lines precise, their gods tall and enigmatic, often half an eat. Their statues faced east toward the sun, waiting each morning to be reborn. No scribes recorded their daily lives. No journals remained to tell us what the children of Napata dreamed of, or how lovers whispered beneath the stars. But perhaps, in that silence they remain eternal and touched by the decay of detail. We imagine a temple courtyard bathed in morning light. A priest kneels before a shrine. A queen looks on, her face serene, carved of patience and command. The mountain looms behind her. The river hums below. It is not a place of victory or conquest, but a sanctuary of continuity. As the stars drift across our own modern sky, Napata rests beneath layers of silt and wind. Its streets are dust now, its walls hot. But when the wind rises just right, you can hear the hymn of a city that never shouted, only listened. Let the hush deepen. Let the stillness settle into your breath. Napata has faded from the maps, but not from the dreaming. Deeper still, into the heart of Kush, we follow the scent of myrrh and the gleam of bronze, towards stories that sleep beneath the stars, wrapped in linen, guarded by the desert's hush. Tonight, we do not walk with kings, but with queens whose names stir the sands, and whose shadows walk still beneath the moonlight. The Kandake, not a name, but a title. A role older than empire, whispered through time as if it were a sacred spell. In other lands, queens were wives. In Kush, they were rulers. These women did not reign from behind curtains. They stood beneath the open sky, their feet firm on temple stone, their hands gripping spears or staffs of command, clad in linen and lion skin, with gold circlets at their brows. They were daughters of the Nile and of the gods. Their presence was command, their silence decree. Among them walked Monarena's warrior of dusk. It was she who faced Rome itself. When Caesar's legions crept too close to Kushite lands, they came with armor, with banners, with imperial pride, and she met them with courage carved from obsidian. One eye lost in battle, she wore her scar as a crown. Rome could not break her. Even Augustus, a mighty on his marble throne, acknowledged her strength. Their war ended not in conquest, but in respect. Another queen, Amanisha Cato, filled her tomb with gold, not for vanity, but for eternity. Her jewelry, unearthed centuries later, sparkled with stories untold. A necklace of falcons, rings of lotus and lion, symbols not of wealth, but of wisdom. These queens were not exceptions. They were tradition. The Kandake lineage stretched for generations, each woman inheriting not just a throne, but a whisper of divinity. They ruled from temples with sandstone steps. They dreamt beneath constellations unrecorded, their memories etched not in scrolls but in scarabs and stone. Their lives remind us, power need not roar to be real. Influence can flow like the Nile, constant, steady, irresistible. They built no walls to protect their names. They let the wind carry them. We see them now, walking at twilight along the river's bend. Their sandals leave no prints. Their voices are the husher reeds. A lion walks beside one silent, loyal, not a beast, but a symbol. Power, not as violence, but as presence. A balance between rule and ritual. Modern history has lost them. Textbooks skip their names, but the desert does not forget. It cradles their crowns beneath the sand, and when the wind sings low enough, it hums their names to the stars. Close your eyes and walk with them. Feel the cool of dusk against your skin. The Kandake return in dreams. Now, let us drift north of Napata, as the Nile's long fingers carry us toward a city that once shimmered in the sunlight like a mirage of memory. A city where pyramids crowd the horizon, not in the glory of Egypt's perfection, but in quiet, jagged reverence. Here, the desert begins to soften, not with green, but with gold, and rising from the sand are dozens upon dozens of pyramids, smaller and steeper than those to the north, but no less sacred. Their stones are sun-warmed, their edges softened by time. They cluster close together, like secrets huddled in silence. These pyramids do not seek to impress. They do not scream their legacy into the sky. Instead, they hum, low and deep, like a chant half-remembered. They are not tombs alone, they are vessels of memory, resting places not just for bones, but for dreams. Each one belonged to a ruler of Kush, a king, a prince, the line of succession woven through generations, with no fanfare, only the ritual of return to the earth. And unlike Egypt, these pyramids were accessible not through grand causeways, but through modest stairways tucked into sand, hidden, sacred. The city of Meroë itself once thrived with markets, temples, and workshops. The clang of metal was not rare here, for the Kushites were skilled iron. Blacksmiths shaped tools and weapons with the precision of priests. They melted the earth, shaped its core, and gave form to function. Meroë glowed not with stone, but with fire. And yet, this fire was gentle. It did not consume, it illuminated. The streets, now silent, once echoed with traders from lands as far as India and Rome, camels laden with ivory, ebony, and silk. The scent of frankincense lingered in the air like a prayer. Language was fluid. Here Greek, Meroitic, Egyptian, all drifting together like leaves upon the Nile. In Meroë, women were not just rulers. They were architects of culture. They commissioned temples. They led processions. Their likenesses appear in relief serene, crowned eternal. The temples, now broken, once bore tall columns etched with gods, both familiar and strange. Lions walked beside falcons. Suns hovered over crescent moons. Amen aped Mark, Isisol invoked, all venerated. Faith here was a blending, not a boundary. And always, the pyramids watched. At twilight, their shadows stretched like ancient fingers across the dunes. They do not shout, they do not beg to be remembered. They are content with presence. Their sharp angles mirror the stars above, as if the heavens themselves were carved in stone and planted into earth. No one knows why the city faded. No armies destroyed it. No catastrophe erased it. It simply slipped like a dream forgotten upon waking. One moment, bustling the next. Buried, but its pyramids remain, quiet, patient, whispering through the wind to any soul still enough to listen. So now, breathe deep. Let the hush of Meroë settle in your chest. Let your thoughts scatter like grains of sand across the desert floor, and feel yourself held by stone, by silence, by time. The city of whispering pyramids still dreams, and tonight, you dream with it. As the stars press deeper into the velvet of the night, the Nile glows with silver breath. Its surface, once golden in the sun's farewell, now reflects the moon like an ancient mirror trembling eternal and wise beyond words. To the people of Kush, the Nile was more than a river. It was the spine of the world, a spirit that pulsed through the body of the land, a giver, a taker, a teacher. It is said that to sleepy by the river's edge was to listen to the voice of the gods, not loud, not demanding, but soft like the rustle of reeds, the lap of water against a stone, the murmur of a heron taking flight into darkness. They built no walls to separate themselves from it. Their homes opened toward its breath, their temples bowed to it. Their dead were buried beside it, their tombs angled toward its flow, as if even in death they yearned to follow its current home. The Nile whispered of time not in straight lines, but in cycles, flood and drought, planting and harvest, birth and farewell. Each bend in the river marked a season, a rhythm, a promise. And in Kush the river was not tamed. It was wild and wide, its cataracts those jagged rapids roaring with power. They called them gates, not barriers, but transitions. Between lands, between states as being. The fifth cataract near Napata sang with thunder. The sixth, nearer to Meroë, danced with foam and stone. To pass him was not a mere crossing, it was a rite. Barges carved from acacia glided over its calmer stretches. Merchants, priests, queens, and potters alike journeyed upon its back. Night voyages were sacred, accompanied by soft chants, by oil lamps flickering in the breeze. Offerings were sometimes lowered into its depths, jars of honey-carved figurines, whispered prayers folded into cloth. And at night, when the moon was full, the river did not rest. It shimmered like a path to the ancestors, a liquid bridge between the now and the forever. In many reliefs and carvings, the Nile appears not as water but as a god reclining, arms outstretched, surrounded by fish and grain and lotus. He is not feared. He is embraced, the source of life. Yes, but also the keeper of memory. Perhaps that is why Kush remains so elusive, so protected, so softly powerful. Its people entrusted their stories not to parchment or boastful monuments, but to the river, to flow, to impermanence. And as we drift now beside that ancient current, as its waters shimmer in our mind's eye, we begin to understand. Kush was not lost, it was simply carried away. Close your eyes, feel the river beneath your breath, and let the moonlight guide you downstream. Among the ruins of Meroë and Napata, etched into the weathered faces of stone stelae and temple walls, lies a language without a voice. It is neither hieroglyph nor cuneiform, not Latin nor Greek. It is Meroitica, the script of Kush, and it has never been understood. To stand before it is to gaze into the soul of a kingdom and feel the ache of distance. Symbols curl like serpents across sandstone, neat rows of mystery. The letters are beautiful in their silence. Upright lines, curved arms, dots like falling rain, each one carved by careful hands with the hope that they would speak forever. But time had other plans. The Meroitic script remains one of the last great undeciphered languages of the ancient world. Though we know the sounds of some letters thanks to a bilingual inscription carved near the end of Kush's reign, the meaning eludes us still. No Rosetta Stone, no mirror text, no final key. It is as if the kingdom tucked away its memories in a locked box, then hid the key in the wind. And yet, what was said in those texts must have mattered. They were carved into tomb walls, into royal inscriptions, into temple pylons meant to last for eternity. They were not idle scrolls. They were proclamations, prayers, names, laws, myths. Imagine the stories we have not heard, the dreams of queens, the histories of battles, the rites of birth and death, the laughter of children written in a script no one can now read. Entire lifetimes turned to silence, and still they wait. There is a haunting dignity in that. A civilization that does not beg to be understood, that leaves behind the echoes of its speech not as a plea, but as a gift, a puzzle left for the patient, for the reverent, for those who understand that some truths do not shout, they hum in frequencies only stillness can perceive. Some scholars have tried, of course. They catalog the symbols, they cross-reference names, they hypothesize and wonder and wish. But still, Meroë keeps its lips sealed. And so we are left with fragments, a name repeated beside a pyramid's base, a sequence of lines above a relief showing a royal procession, a phrase carved into the seat of a sandstone throne. But the messenger has vanished. What does it feel like, you wonder, to speak a language that no longer speaks back? Perhaps like dreaming in a tongue no one else remembers, perhaps like hearing music through water, but not all is lost. For in the brush of each symbol, there is rhythm. In their placement, intent, in their survival, defiance. They remain even as the world forgets. So tonight, we honor the script of Meroë not for what we know of it, but for what it dares us to imagine. Let your mind drift over its lines. Let your breath become their syllables. Let mystery be enough, for not every silence is empty. Some are sacred, and the words of Kush, though unread, still shine in the dark like stars, waiting in the heart of Meroë's forgotten temples. Amidst shattered altars and sun-bleached columns, one figure roars quietly through the dust, the lion god of Kush, unlike the deities of neighboring Egypt, whose forms were borrowed by Kushite faith with reverence and reinterpretation. Apedmuk was wholly theirs, born of Nubian soil, not Nile delta, wild, fierce, yet also wise and calm. He is often depicted with the body of a man and the head of a lion, crowned with a tall headdress and holding symbols of life and power. In some reliefs, he steps forward, flanked by cobras and lotus. In others, he stands serene, towering beside queens and priests who offer incense at his feet. Apedmuk was not a god of chaos. He was a god of strength, of balance, of the king's resolve and the queen's command. He was the protector of Meroë, the silent guardian of boundaries not drawn on maps, but etched into the spirit. He ruled not from the heavens, but from the edges of civilization, of deserts, of the known and unknown. And like the lions that roamed Kushite lands, he appeared when least expected, vanishing just as quietly. In the temple of Musawwada-e-Sufra, deep within the sandstone folds of the Butana region, Apedmuk's image was carved over and over again into walls that rise like echoes in stone. One mural stretches wide, a rare scene of the lion god emerging from a lotus, his power blooming not from fire, but from water and stillness. Pilgrims once walked these halls in silent reverence. No shouting, no frenzy, only ritual. They carried offerings, perhaps honey, perhaps dried meat, perhaps words spoken into jars and buried beneath stone altars. The temple complex itself is vast, mysterious in purpose, not a palace, not a city. Some believe it was a center for initiation, where priests and royalty learned the sacred ways of silence. Others whisper it was a sanctuary for healing, where lions were perhaps kept and honored, not caged but worshipped. Imagine the dusk inside these walls. Long shadows, columns bathed in oak, the scent of burned acacia resin lingering in the air, a lion statue glowing beneath torchlight. Just presence, just breath. Apedmuk did not demand obedience. He stood as a symbol of courage, yes, but also of sovereignty over self, of power that does not dominate, but protects, of leadership rooted not in fear, but in balance. Even today, when the wind glides through these abandoned halls, there are those who claim they hear a low growl, like breath through reeds. Not a warning, but a welcome. A reminder that the gods of Kush have not fled. They simply rest beneath the sand, waiting for those who move slow enough to listen. So let your thoughts pat quietly, like a lion through temple corridors. Let your breath align with ancient rhythms. Let Apedmuk guide your dreaming, for the lion god still watches, not with hunger but with grace. Word count 689 awaiting continue. ChatGPT said, Chapter 8. The forgotten crafts of fire and iron. Beneath the golden skin of the Kushite Empire, beneath its temples and crowns and pyramids, pulsed the quiet rhythm of a furnace. It glowed in the workshops of Meroë, in the hands of smiths and artisans, in the red reflection dancing across stone walls. Fire, iron, transformation. Meroë was not only the city of queens and pyramids, it was a city of fireborn knowledge, a place where earth's dark core was melted and reshaped not with haste, but with reverence. The ironworkers of Kush were masters of their art, long before many parts of the world knew the language of smelting. The people of Meroë spoke it fluently. They carved trenches for bellows, stacked layers of charcoal and ore, and fed the flames like a sacred ritual. The air shimmered with heat. The walls sang with the ringing of hammers. Theirs was a craft of alchemy, not magic, but transformation. The iron was not simply forged for war. It became plows to turn the sacred soil, blades for harvests, tools for temples, spears for defense. And each furnace was a doorway, not merely between raw and refined, but between human will and elemental power. No texts describe their precise methods. No manuals survive. And yet, scattered across the land are the remnants of their labor slags of spent ore, broken molds, rusted tools now fused with time. In silence, they testify. Iron did not only change the tools of the people, it changed the rhythm of life. With stronger blades, more trees fell. With better plows, deeper furrows held water. With sharper tips, borders could be defended with less blood, more precision. The smoke that curled from Meroë's forges carried more than ash. It carried ambition, and perhaps prayer. We picture a twilight forge now. The fire low but steady. A woman squats near the flame, her brow gleaming. She pulls a blade from the coals not to wield, but to inspect. Behind her, a child watches, wide-eyed, lips parted in wonder. The tools of kings begin here, not on thrones, but in calloused hands. The smiths of Meroë were not loud. They left no boasts carved into stone, but their legacy lingers in the red soil. Their sparks still glow in the darkness. If you know where to look, iron was the silent heartbeat of Kush. It rang beneath crowns and beneath the sand. It bound the seen and the unseen, the earth and the stars. So rest now beside the embers. Let the warmth fold around you. Let your breath align with the rhythm of hammer and flame. And know that in the fire's hush, the past still shapes the future. Beneath the golden skin of the Kushite Empire, beneath its temples and crowns and pyramids, pulsed the quiet rhythm of a furnace. It glowed in the workshops of Meroë, in the hands of smiths and artisans, in the red reflection dancing across stone walls. Fire, iron, transformation. Meroë was not only the city of queens and pyramids, it was a city of fireborn knowledge, a place where earth's darker was melted and reshaped not with haste, but with reverence. The ironworkers of Kush were masters of their art, long before many parts of the world knew the language of smelting. The people of Meroë spoke it fluently. They carved trenches for bellows, stacked layers of charcoal and ore, and fed the flames like a sacred ritual. The air shimmered with heat. The walls sang with the ringing of hammers. Theirs was a craft of alchemy, not magic, but transformation. The iron was not simply forged for war. It became plows to turn the sacred soil, blades for harvests, tools for temples, spears for defense. And each furnace was a doorway, not merely between raw and refined, but between human will and elemental power. No texts describe their precise methods. No manuals survive. And yet, scattered across the land are the remnants of their labor slags of spent ore, broken molds, rusted tools now fused with time. In silence, they testify. Iron did not only change the tools of the people, it changed the rhythm of life. With stronger blades, more trees fell. With better plows, deeper furrows held water. With sharper tips, borders could be defended with less blood, more precision. The smoke that curled from Meroë's forges carried more than ash. It carried ambition, and perhaps prayer. We picture a twilight forge now. The fire low but steady. A woman squats near the flame, her brow gleaming. She pulls a blade from the coals not to wield, but to inspect. Behind her, a child watches, wide-eyed, lips parted in wonder. The tools of kings begin here, not on thrones, but in calloused hands. The smiths of Meroë were not loud. They left no boasts carved into stone, but their legacy lingers in the red soil. Their sparks still glow in the darkness. If you know where to look, iron was the silent heartbeat of Kush. It rang beneath crowns and beneath the sand. It bound the seen and the unseen, the earth and the stars. So rest now beside the embers. Let the warmth fold around you. Let your breath align with the rhythm of hammer and flame. And know that in the fire's hush, the past still shapes the future. Now the river bends again, and before us rises a shape against the desert's edge, not a palace, not a tower, but a mountain, small by worldly measures, and yet immense in its stillness. Jebel Barkal, they called it, the pure mount, the place of origin, a finger of stone pointing from earth to the divine. To the ancient Kushites, Jebel Barkal was more than a landmark. It was a living presence, a guardian of the sacred, a mirror of the unseen. And from its base, history unfolded, not in pages, but in prayer. Its sandstone cliffs glowed red at sunset, like the breath of some slumbering deity. Caravans would pause at its feet, not only to rest, but to reflect. For to look upon Jebel Barkal was to be reminded of scale, not just the size of a mountain, but the size of the unknown. Temples were carved into its base. Slender halls led into the mountain's heart. Cool, silent chambers whispered of gods with ram heads and sun discs, of queens anointed in incense, of kings crowned beneath the stone's unblinking gaze. Amen. The Hidden One was believed to dwell here not in the sky, but in the stone. He was not thunderous like Zeus, nor radiant like Ra. He was breath. He was the pause between thoughts, and his voice was heard in the harsher wind winding through the mountains' folds. When the Kushite kings rose to power, they came here not to declare authority, but to seek approval. The coronation was not complete until Jebel Barkal had witnessed it, until the god within had accepted their name. And so they built shrines, modest in size, mighty in spirit. They filled them with offerings, gold bowls, polished figurines, baskets of grain, not out of fear, but out of longing, a desire to be part of the sacred rhythm, not above it. The mountain also carried shape. A natural spire at its front resembled a uraeus, the rearing cobra symbol of divine rule. To some, it looked like a crown. To others, a flame. Always, it meant presence, an earthly signal of the gods. Even today, when silence falls across the ruins of Napata, Jebel Barkal watches. Its shadow stretches across the graves of kings and the drift of forgotten roads. Birds wheel in slow spirals above it, as if pulled by memory. To climb it is to step into the hush. To stand at its summit is not to conquer, but to surrender. You feel the wind wrap around you like a cloak. You feel the heat of sun-warmed stone beneath your feet. And for a moment, you're part of it. Not as a visitor, but as something older, something remembered. So rest now at the foot of the sacred mountain. Let your thoughts become stone. Let your breath become wind, and feel the heartbeat of the earth, as it once beat through the souls of kings and the dreams of queens. Jebel Barkal still stands, not as a ruin, but as a remembrance. Beyond the cities, beyond the temples and the mountains, the desert of Kush opens into silence, a vastness that stretches beyond the eye's reach and the mind's map, and buried beneath its endless folds lie the tombs. They do not rise in grand display. They do not demand to be seen. They are tucked into hillsides, veiled beneath dunes, and shielded by time. Some are marked by stone. Others are unmarked, known only to the wind and to the stars. Here, the dead of Kush did not vanish. They traveled. For to the Kushites, death was not an ending. It was a river of its own, a passage to another place, not frightening, but sacred. The tomb was not a prison, it was a portal. Many tombs were dug into rock, carved by candlelight, painted with scenes not of sorrow but of continuity. The deceased are shown standing before deities, presenting offerings, surrounded by family, by music, by birds in flight. They are not judged, they are welcomed. And around them, the walls speak in the Meroë script, a language we cannot understand, and yet somehow feel. The words wind across the chambers like breath, as if the tomb itself whispers reassurance to the one who sleeps inside. Some were buried with treasures not as wealth, but as guidance, a ring worn smooth by time, a mirror to reflect not the face, but the soul, beads of faience colored like river water in cloudless sky, a bowl of food, long since turned to dust, but still full in intention. And some tombs, too, held more subtle things. A favorite song, never written but always remembered, a name spoken aloud one final time before the stone was sealed. A story passed down, now lost but once loved. The desert was never empty, it was a library. Every grain of sand a page, every buried tomb a chapter, but the wind has scattered the pages. The names of countless Kush, their lives known only to the stars, yet the tombs remain. Some collapsed, some untouched. A few have been opened, their walls still bright with ochre and umber, their contents carefully studied. Others rest in secrecy, their entrance covered by time, and perhaps that is as it should be. For Kush did not live to be remembered in noise. It lived to be felt in silence, and its dead, resting in their desert chambers, still dream beneath the dunes. So as the wind brushes the edges of your thoughts, imagine walking that golden expanse. Each step soft, each breath slow, the sun warm upon your skin. And beneath you, the dreams of a people who never truly left. Sleep now, among the tombs, not as a mourner, but as a guest. The desert holds its stories close, but it welcomes those who walk gently. There are no roaring fountains in the ancient land of Kush, no grand aqueducts or ornate pools as in distant Rome. But still, water played a sacred role, held not in excess, but in reverence. And nowhere was this more evident than in the lotus pools, near temple courtyards, tucked quietly behind sacred enclosures or within garden walls, long crumbled to dust. There once rippled shallow pools, small, circular, reflective. Their waters were still fed by careful channels from the Nile or by patient hands during the flood season. Lotus blossoms drifted across the surface, pink-white, deep violet, their petals opened to the rising sun and folded again at dusk, mirroring the rhythm of breath, of prayer, of the soul's awakening. The lotus, in Kush as in Egypt, was a sacred flower, a symbol of rebirth, of the cycle between life and silence, light and shadow. But in Kush it felt more personal, less imperial, and more intimate, a flower offered by hand, not decree. priests would gather near the pools at dawn. They would wash their hands in the chilled water, lift their faces to the wind, and speak to the gods in tones too soft for time to catch. The water, touched by starlight before sunrise, was believed to carry truth. It was not for spectacle, it was for sincerity. In some tombs, small basins carved into the stone suggest the presence of water rituals. Imagine it, a final washing before burial, a blessing upon the body, the whisper of lotus petals scattered upon the surface, the ripples echoing farewell. Children, too, would have gathered near the pools, their laughter brief, their play respectful, splashing no louder than birds, their joy folded into the hush of the space. For even the young understudies were places of reflection, not noise. Lotus seeds were buried with the dead, not as symbols alone, but as seeds' literal hope for bloom in another life. Some were pressed into amulets, others painted into murals. Always, the message was clear: no matter the depth of night, morning would come. The blossom would open again, and as centuries passed, and the pools dried, and the temples cracked, the lotus remained, in the carvings, in the soil, in the dreams. To stand before a ruined basin now is to feel the ghost of water, the whisper of stillness, the breath of incense long extinguished. But if you lean close, if you let the silence deepen, you may still hear it, the soft pluck of a petal falling, the echo of a prayer unfinished. Kush did not shout its faith, it bloomed it. So let your breath settle like a lotus on still water. Let your thoughts float without urgency. And in this moment, remember, the sacred need not be large. It need only be present. And sometimes, the most profound truths drift quietly, on petals, across forgotten pools. Lift your gaze now, dreamer, from the sand and the stone to the velvet canopy above. For the Kushites, like many ancient peoples, looked not only to the earth for guidance, but to the sky. The stars were not distant to them. They were companions, guides, timekeepers, spirits of the eternal. Each night, as the fires in Meroë's hearts dimmed and the hush of sleep fell across temple and home, the stars revealed their ancient map. They did not simply glimmer, they whispered. The night sky over Kush was vast and clear, unspoiled by the noise of cities or the haze of time. Its constellations may have mirrored those of Egypt, but the meaning infused within them was uniquely Nubian. They traced their stories not in the lines of empire, but in the rhythm of presence. Some scholars believe the pyramids of Meroë and Napata aligned not just with solar markers, but with particular stars, north and south, east and west, yes, but also aligned with points in the night where certain stars rose or set, season by season, like memories circling back. The dead were buried not just with care for the body, but with orientation to the heavens. The soul, it was believed, would ascend not into an abstract afterlife, but into the sky itself. The stars were not merely symbols of divinity, they were destinations. Ancestors shone there, kings rested among them, queens became constellations, glowing softly for those still walking the earth. Priests would study the heavens from atop temple roofs, measuring time not in days, but in the slow wanderings of Venus and the sudden reappearance of Sirius. Their tools were simple: a rod, a string, a pair of eyes trained to patience, and yet their knowledge was vast. The stars also guided journeys across desert, across water. For the traders and travelers of Kush, the night was not feared, it was a companion. The stars were as reliable as the river, as steady as breath, and in their myths now lost, or half remembered, there must have been tales of star-born beings, of divine messages written in the sky, of omens and blessings tied to the dance of planets and the slow shift of the moon. We know little now of their names for the constellations. Their legends have faded from the page, but perhaps, if you lie beneath the same sky they once watched, you will feel them. The lion of Apidmark prowling across the horizon, the lotus of dawn blooming beneath Orion's shoulder, the river of souls winding through the Milky Way. Stars are not erased, they are merely forgotten, until we remember. So close your eyes, but lift your spirit skyward. Let the hush of constellations wrap around you. Let your dreams walk the same star roads the ancient Kushites once followed. The heavens do not forget. They wait, and above the silent land of Kush, they still shine. Drifts now into the perfumed stillness of ritual. For in the temples of Kush, amid towering columns and the hush of prayer, the air was thick with scent. Not the smell of dust or decay, but of incense, slow burning, sacred, a language made not of words, but of aroma. Frankincense, Aaron, cinnamon, acacia, resin, blended and ground, shaped into cones, or pressed into oils that shimmered in the light of clay lamps. These were the breath of ceremony, the unseen veil between human and divine. Every morning, in the coolness before the sun's rise, priests would enter the sanctuaries. They moved with quiet deliberation, their steps echoing softly on stone floors, still holding the chill of night. In their hands, small vessels of burning resin. In their hearts, the rhythm of ancient invocation. Smoke spiraled upward, slow and deliberate. It curled around statues of gods, around the seated image of Amun, around the sacred altars shaped like open lotus petals. The scent wove its way into the stone, into the breath of the worshippers, into time itself. For to the Kushites, incense was not perfume. It was offering, communication, a bridge between realms. It carried thoughts upward, transformed breath into presence. In the slow drift of smoke, prayers rose without urgency. Nothing hurried, nothing demanded. Even in tombs, traces of burned resin have been found, sealed in jars or sprinkled across burial cloth. The dead, too, were wrapped in fragrance, not to preserve but to bless, to accompany their journey with the scent of home. And in marketplaces, away from temples, incense was still sacred. Traders handled the resins like treasure. Families burned them during births, during healings, during times of change. Scent marked the transitions of life. But it was not only incense that filled the air. The wind itself was sacred. The way it moved through palm fronds, the way it stirred the curtains in a queen's chamber, the way it swept through the sandstone corridors of temples at dusk. Kush was a land of breath, of pause, of presence. Even now, when one walks the ruins, there are moments when the air feels different, warmer, thicker, as if a priest has just passed, as if a ritual has only just ended. Close your eyes and smell the past, not as memory, but as presence. Let the frankincense curl through your thoughts. Let the desert wind cool your skin. This was a civilization that spoke through senses, through touch and taste and scent, through texture and temperature, through breath. And when we remember Kush, we must remember with more than the mind. We must remember with the soul. So inhale slowly and exhale even slower, and feel the sacred wind of Kush pass through you. Beneath the sands and the sun-faded stone of Kush, color once bloomed like memory. Those centuries have stripped the world of its pigments. Once long ago, walls glowed with life. In tombs near Napata and Meroë, in temples forgotten by all but wind, the Kushites painted not in broad spectacle, but with delicate intention. Their brushes, perhaps carved from reeds or animal hair, whispered across plaster like feathers against skin. These walls told stories not in noise, but in quiet rhythm. They spoke of processions and offerings, of gods in lion form, of queens cradling lotus blooms and kings clasping sacred staffs. Each scene was measured, balanced, a dance of symbol and silence. The colors, though faded now, once pulsed with earth-born beauty. Deep reds of iron-rich clay, soft blues of powdered stone, yellow ochres drawn from desert veins, black from charcoal, white from ash. No color was wasted. Each had its place, its purpose. A queen's robe might shine indigo beneath a gold crown. A priest's sandals traced with ochre dust. A lion god roared, not in sound, but in red strokes and solemn outline. Their world, though lost to time, was never without color. And these colors did not shout. They breathed. Imagine a chamber lit by flickering oil lamps. Shadows dance across the painted walls. The scent of resin lingers. A child is led by a priest, learning each image, each god, each gesture. The child does not question. The child listens. To the Kushites, art was not for display, it was for presence. A prayer in pigment, a reminder in form. And so they painted not only to decorate, but to align, to set the soul in rhythm with the eternal. The passage of time, light wind, has worn many images away. Some figures are blurred, some faces lost. A god's hand reaches into nothingness. A queen's eye stares from a cracked wall, and yet something remains. The echo of intent, the residue of reverence. Even in fragments, the walls speak. There are still corners where the colors remain bright, shielded from sun, preserved by chance. A swath of blue beneath a crown. A row of lotus petals trailing a procession. Symbols whose meanings have drifted into the unknown, yet still stir something ancient in us. We do not need to read the inscriptions to feel their truth. We need only stand still, breathe deep, and look. The walls of Kush were not canvases. They were mirrors of the soul. So let your eyes close now, and imagine the colors blooming behind your lids. Not garish, not loud, but soft, sacred, steady. The painted walls of time are not lost. They are waiting, in the hush, in the quiet chambers behind the throne, where the morning light entered only in strands of gold and shadow. There once lay a mirror, smooth, polished, framed in ivory or bronze. It belonged to a queen of Kush, perhaps another whose name the sands have cradled in silence. The mirror did not reflect vanity. It reflected vision. To the queens of Kush, the mirror was sacred. It showed not only the face, but the self-lit breath behind the gaze, the lineage behind the eyes. It was a tool of reflection, not just in appearance, but in purpose. Imagine her now, seated on woven linen, her robes soft with sacred oils. She holds the mirror at sunrise, not to paint her cheeks, but to watch the light gather upon her brow. She traces the curve of her lip, not with pride, but with memory. Each line, each mark a testament to battles faced, rituals performed, burdens carried. For the Kandake, beauty was not decoration, it was devotion. The adornments she wore, necklaces of carnelian, cuffs of gold shaped like lion heads, were not for delight. They were symbol. Each piece spoke to the gods, each color aligned with meaning. The mirror was a portal, a quiet one. It might have stood upon her table during treaty discussions, resting as she chose the fate of regions, watching her from within, as if the past and future peered out together. Or perhaps it traveled with her wrapped in cloth, placed within the folds of her sedan chair as she rode along the Nile, the sun flickering across its surface. In some tombs, mirrors have been found among the burial treasures, discs of polished silver, still catching light across centuries. They were buried beside their owners, not to reflect the face in the afterlife, but to anchor the soul, to hold the last light of this world for the journey into the next. There is something sacred in that act, to leave a mirror behind and trust that it will remember you. The queens of Kush, though powerful and public, kept their inner lives folded quietly, like silk. They needed no scrolls to declare their rule. They needed only to stand, to walk through corridors lit by lamps, to breathe in the scent of incense, to lift a mirror in silence and feel the weight of history gaze back. And now, that mirror, if it still rests beneath the earth, no, but perhaps it holds something else, a shimmer. So, close your eyes, dreamer, and imagine the reflection not your own, but hers. See the gaze that ruled without cruelty, the poise that needed no permission, the softness that shaped empires. Let the queen's mirror show you, not who you are, but who you have always been. Still, present, eternal. In the heart of ancient Kush, where temples breathed incense and stars painted the ceiling of night, music moved not only people but stone. It was never carved in sheet or scroll, never recorded in measure or tempo, but it lived, undeniably, in the hands and hearts of the Kush, in the fingers of drummers, in the breath of flutists, in the voices that rose not to be remembered, but to remember. Music in Kush was sacred, not spectacle, not entertainment, but invocation. In temple ceremonies, rhythmic chants echoed between sandstone walls, harmonizing with the pulse of the priest's footsteps and the low hum of the sacred names. These were not performances. These were opening sound, acting as a key, unlocking the barrier between this world and the next. Drums carved from hollowed wood and stretched animal skin beat in circular patterns, echoes of the sun, of the Nile, of the womb. Their tones, deep and steady, grounded the body while freeing the spirit. Flutes of reed or bone carried higher notes, thin and trembling, like wind whispering across water. They did not sing over the world, but beneath it. Sistrums, those crescent-shaped rattles, cried softly in the hands of priestesses. Each shake sent a ripple of vibration into the air, as if stirring the silence into form. These instruments were often reserved for the most sacred rites. When the gods were to be called, it was not with words but with sound. And then there were the human voices. Imagine them at dusk, in the inner sanctum of a temple. A single voice begins low, steady, reciting a name, a plea, a praise. Then others join, not in harmony, as we know it, but in resonance. Each voice a thread in a larger tapestry. The air thickens, the walls respond. The stone itself seems to tremble not with fear, but with memory. Even in daily life, music found its way. Mothers hummed two children beneath the shade of acacia trees. Shepherds played bone flutes as the goats wandered near the riverbanks. Blacksmiths sang in rhythm with the ring of hammer on iron. Their songs, like their tools, shaped the day. The music of Kush did not aim to impress. It aimed to align, to bring the self back into the rhythm of the land, the river, the divine. And though we have no recordings, no notations, we feel its echo in the architecture, in the ritual, in the way the temples were built to hold sound, not to block it. The narrow halls, the domed ceilings, they amplify the human voice as if every syllable mattered. Perhaps that's why, when one stands in the ruins of a Kushite sanctuary, there's a sense of presence, not absence, as if the last note still lingers, just beyond hearing. And in dreams, if we listen closely, we might still hear it. A drum, a name spoken into the night. So now, dear dreamer, let your heart beat slow and steady. Let your breath carry ancient notes, and imagine the music that once filled these sacred spaces. For in Kush, even silence was music, stretching outward from the cities of Meroë and Napata, from temples hidden in the cliffs and shrines nestled by the Nile's embrace. There lay roads not of stone, not paved or grand, but paths worn smooth by footsteps and hooves, by wheels and silence. The roads of Kush were made of dust and memory. They wound through savanna and thorn, past acacia groves and dry riverbeds. They followed the gentle rise of the land and the deeper bends of the Nile, connecting not only cities, but stories. These were trade roads, yes, but more than that. They were vessels of encounter. Along these routes moved ivory and incense, gold and cattle, jars of honey and woven baskets filled with sorghum, but also laughter, also news, also prayer, Camels tread here, donkeys braided morning light. Merchants walked in loose robes, their feet wrapped in linen against the heat. They knew each curve in the land, each cluster of trees, each rock that cast shaded noon. The road, to them, was not a challenge, it was a companion. And these roads were ancient, older than empire, before Meroë rose, before pyramids pierced the sky. These paths had already been made first by antelope, then by herders, then by kings. They led south to the riches of inner Africa, to the land of Punt, to places we still do not fully understand. They led north toward Egypt, toward Alexandria, and beyond, eastward, toward the Red Sea and the distant kingdoms of incense, west, into the silence. But these were not highways of conquest, they were arteries of communion. Along them stood way stations, not grand inns, but small shelters of stone and wood, places to rest, to pray, to prepare for the next bend of horizon, water jars buried in cool sand, shade made from palm leaves, fire pits circled by stone. At night, the stars served as map and lantern, and the wind carried the sounds of jackals and the slow breathing of earth. Pilgrims walked these roads barefoot, seeking shrines long forgotten by history. Priests traveled in procession, sacred scrolls wrapped tight and carried in leather cases. Queens rode upon sedan chairs shaded by linen, their thoughts perhaps wandering further than the road itself. And always, the dust rose behind them, a gentle cloud, then gone. Today, many of these paths are swallowed by the land. You may walk a trail and not know it was once part of a vast network, but if you pause, if you sit in silence and let the sun settle upon your shoulders, you may feel something. A pulse beneath your feet, a warmth in the wind, a whisper of sandals, long vanished. These roads are not lost. They are resting. They remind us that history is not only held in walls and crowns, it is held in footsteps, in roots remembered by the land, in dust that has passed from hand to hand. So walk gently now, in your dreaming. Feel the road beneath you, soft and warm. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the steps of those who came before. And remember, in Kush, even the dust was sacred within the sacred enclosures of Kushite temples, where the breeze carried the perfume of frankincense and the air shimmered with silence, stood the guardians not of flesh, but of stone. They lined the entrances, flanked the doorways, sat beneath the lintels and above the altars, creatures carved from granite and sandstone, part human, part divine, entirely eternal. Some were sphinx-knot Egyptian copies, but uniquely new. Their faces bore the soft curvature of Kushite kings, with full lips and calm eyes, their bodies crouched in eternal patience, their paws resting gently on the earth, as if listening. Others stood Talians upright on two legs, their manes flowing into the shapes of sun discs and serpents. Apedmak, always among them. But there were more, gods whose names we no longer know, whose meanings have faded but whose presence still holds. To walk past them was to walk through thresholds, not simply from outside to inside, but from ordinary to sacred. Each statue was a sentinel, not fierce, not. They did not speak. They simply were, crafted by hands now turned to dust. These guardians were shaped not to impress the eye, but to align the soul. Each fold in the robe, each curve of jaw, each carving in the base told a story, a silent sermon in stone. Time has worn them, softened their edges. Some have crumbled entirely. Others remain half religious, the suggestion of a nose or the curve of a claw emerging from the earth, like memory returning. And yet, their gaze is not dimmed, even eroded. The eyes hold presence. They meet yours, not with challenge, but with stillness, as if asking, do you see? Many of these guardians stood in pairs, one to the left, one to the right, facing inward, or outward, or across the threshold itself. They were not symmetrical copies. Each had its own posture, its own energy, one perhaps more alert, the other more contemplative. In the deeper chambers, smaller statues lined the inner sanctums, seated deities, their hands resting on their knees, their crowns rising like flames, their ears carved wide to hear not the clamor of the world, but the breath of a single prayer. They were an invitation to hush. Even now, if you walk among the ruins of these temples, you may find one broken, shadowed, half swallowed by sand. You may kneel before it and feel a shift in the air. Not fear, not sadness, just stillness. And in that stillness a knowing, for the guardians of Kush were not placed there to frighten. They were placed to remind that the sacred is always near, that silence has weight, that presence lives not in noise, but in form. So let your breath slow, let your shoulders release their burden, and imagine walking between these ancient sentinels, not as a stranger, but as one returning home. In the land of Kush, the gods did not shout, they waited in stone. Deep beneath the riverbeds and hills of ancient Kush, the earth shimmered with secrets, gold, not in ingots stacked in vaults, not in coins to be traded, but in dust, in veins, in the bones of the land itself. The people of Kush knew where to find it, how to draw it forth, not with greed, but with reverence. To them, gold was not wealth. It was language. It adorned not only the living, but the divine. Gods were crowned with golden discs. Queens wore necklaces shaped like suns and falcons. Kings held scepters wrapped in bands of hammered gold, not to blind the eye, but to steady the soul. Gold did not need to boast in Kush. It gleamed softly, like the Nile beneath morning light. Artisans shaped it with fire and breath. Their tools were simple stones, hammers, carved molds, but their precision was sacred. A single bead, the size of a lentil, could take hours to shape. A clasp might bear the image of a lion's eye or a lotus unfolding. Each piece was a prayer, and gold was never without meaning. A spiral represented eternity, a triangle, the balance of earth, river, and sky. When a queen wore a broad collar of golden plaques, she carried with her not ornament, but power spoken not in words, but in symbols. It traveled to caravans, carried it north to Egypt, east to Arabia, west into lands unnamed by history, but always it returned. For Kush was known not only as a land of gold, it was the source of its soul. Even in death, gold was never abandoned. Tombs have yielded rings and earrings, amulets, and all carefully placed beside the body, not to accompany, but to guide. The gold knew the way. In the silence of the burial chamber, beneath the weight of the earth and the hush of centuries, a pendant rests against a chest long returned to dust. Its surface still glimmers faintly, untouched by decay. A sun carved into its center, a symbol of return. And when the wind passes over the desert where Meroë once stood, some say it carries a shimmer not of light, but of memory, the residue of gold once worn, once held, once gifted. There is a kind of richness that cannot be spent, only remembered. And in Kush gold spoke, not of wealth, but of presence, not of conquest, but of meaning. So close your eyes. Let your thoughts rest like gold dust in a quiet stream. Let the warmth rise in your chest, not from heat, but from knowing that beauty need not declare itself. Sometimes it simply shines. And in the language of Kush, gold stew speaks. The land of Kush was not always dry. Though today we imagine the region as an endless canvas of sand and stone, there were holy seasons when the sky opened its palm and rain touched the earth. When the rains came, they did not crash or roar. They arrived slowly, like a forgotten promise. The wind changed first, carrying a scent of distant water. The clouds rolled in, not fierce, but solemn. Shadows drifted over temples and fields, and then the sky wept. Raindrops pattered across the red soil like soft drumming. They filled the dry rip. They ran down the walls of pyramids. They traced the carvings on ancient stelae like fingers relearning forgotten stories. In villages and royal courts alike, the people paused. Even kings lifted their faces skyward. Priests emerged from their sanctuaries. Children danced barefoot in the shallow pools. Animals turned their eyes to the sky and stood very still. The rain was not taken for granted. It was a visitation, a benediction, and when the last drop fell and the clouds drifted away, the silence that followed was more profound than before, of the land catching its breath. In that hush, everything felt more alive. The scent of whetstone, the glisten of leaves in the acacia trees, the slow return of birdsong. The earth, still warm beneath the moisture, sighed beneath bare feet. Even the temples seemed to glow. Their walls, darkened by the rain, looked newly carved. Statues bore a sheen of reverence. The air smelled of clay and myrrh. In this rare season, the farmers would begin to till the dampened fields. The women would gather reeds newly green. The scribes might write again, inspired by the freshness of it all, though few of those scrolls remain. It is said that even the gods walked the earth more freely in the hours after rain, that the veil between the seen and unseen grew thin, that dreams, born that night, carried messages. Perhaps the kings of Kush dreamed then, of lions wading through wet grass, of pyramids rising from pools of gold, of ancestors whispering not in riddles, but in clarity. And perhaps the queens, seated in their quiet chambers, felt the weight of their crown lift just slightly. This was not the flood of the Nile, predictable, mighty. This was the gentle blessing of rain, a reminder that even in silence, life stirs, that beneath the hardest earth, seeds wait. So now, let your breath slow like the retreating storm. Let your mind quiet like a field after rainfall. Let the silence wrap around you, not empty. In the land of Kush, the rain did not command, it whispered, and its silence still lingers along the bends of the Nile where reeds grew tall and shadows shimmered in the afternoon heat. The children of Kush once played and written by history, unnamed by tablets, and yet more eternal than kings. Their voices were never carved in stone. Their laughter left no monument. And yet their footprints once lined the same dusty paths, the same sacred courtyards, the same banks where crocodiles slept in the sun. They were the daughters of potters, the sons of weavers, the nieces of priests, the cousins of queens. They ran barefoot, skin warm with sunlight, arms slick with river water. They tied amulets around their necks, tiny carved lions or lotus seeds. Charms not for wealth, but for protection. They did not rule, they did not conquer, but they carried the soul of Kush. In the early light, they helped grind grain, watched the fire while bread rose inside clay domes, and fetched water in painted jars too large for their arms, but they carried them anyway because that was the rhythm of life. And in the evenings, after the chants in the temples had faded, after the market fires glowed low, they would gather by the water. There, they learned the constellations not by name, but by shape and story. There, they heard the old tales of gods who wept gold, of queens who spoke with lions, of rivers that could dream. Their toys were simple, sticks carved into animals, bits of fired clay shaped into chariots, dolls wrapped in linen scraps. Yet in their hands, these became empires, battles, love songs, and festivals. A girl might pretend to be a man, a boy might pretend to sail down the Nile to lands no one had yet named, navigating the stars with a tilt of his chin. They knew the land's rhythms in their bones, the way the wind turned before a sandstorm, the color of the river when hippos passed, the sound of lions calling from distant cliffs. Sometimes they were quiet, sitting beside their elders during festivals, eyes wide with wonder as incense smoke curled into the sky. They listened as if each word was a secret they would carry forever. And when they died, as old many were buried near their homes, wrapped gentes offered songs. Some tombs, small and shallow, still hold traces, a favorite toy, a bit of jewelry, a worn bracelet carved from shell. No history remembers their names, but their lives mattered. For what is a kingdom without its children, without the ones who feel the land before they understand it? Even now, if you walk near the Nile at dusk, in the hush between wind and water, you may feel them, in the rustle of reeds, in the rhythm of sandals, in the memory of joy. They were not lost. They are simply still playing, still running through the fields of time, still whispering stories into the breeze. So breathe softly now and listen. The children of Kush remember you. As the final rays of the sun dipped behind the low hills beyond the Nile, Meroë did not sleep. It shimmered quietly, softly like a lantern behind silk. For when the day's labor ended, when the heat retreated, the city exhaled, and its night markets awoke. These were not grand bazaars filled with shouting and clamor. No, the markets of Kush were quieter, more contemplative, arranged like offerings to the night. Lamps flickered in shallow bowls of oil, their light catching on brass trinkets and polished stones. Mats were unrolled on the cool earth, and vendors knelt beside their wares not to hawk or harass, but to be present. There was rhythm in the arrangement, grace in the stillness. Here, incense drifted on the breeze, not just for sale, but to bless the space, to settle the air, to slow the heart. A woman might offer carved ivory combs, their teeth fine as whispers. Another, jars of honey sealed with linen and wax, dried figs, clusters of dates, salt brought from distant cliffs, iron tools and golden beads, spices that made the breath catch cinnamon, coriander, something darker, unknowable. Children watched with quiet awe as traders unwrapped goods from distant lands. A shard of blue glass, a feather from a land beyond the sea, a woven cloth that shimmered like moonlight. These were wonders not because they were rare, but because they were shared. There was music too, but not the kind that filled the square, just the gentle pluck of a stringed instrument, the occasional murmur of a song. It was not for performance, but for presence, a lullaby for the city's soul. Lovers met in the folds of the market, their hands brushing over bracelets and bronze pins. Old friends exchanged wine in small cups, their laughter muffled like wind through linen. The elders sat at the edges, nodding in approval as the young learned to trade, to speak, to listen. And through it all, the night held steady. Stars blinked above the tents. The moon cast its cool silver glow over the sand. This was not a place of power, it was a place of peace. Meroë's markets did not build kingdoms, but they wove them together. They were places of gathering not just for goods, but for stories. Each transaction, a thread in the city's fabric. Each glance, each gesture, a continuation of the sacred rhythm that pulsed beneath the stone and sky. And when midnight neared, the vendors packed slowly, not with haste, but with ceremony. The mats were rolled, the lamps extinguished one by one, the final bowls of dates shared like blessings. The market did not close. It exhaled, and the city, at last, slept. So close your eyes now, as if walking through the aisles. Feel the coolness of the stone beneath your feet. Smell the honey, the spice, the gentle ash of fading lamps. Hear the soft rustle of linen in the wind. The night markets of Meroë may be gone, but their song still lingers in the hush of your dreaming. There are moments in history when the world does not speak, when time like a tide river slows its current, when the chisel falls silent, the ink dries, the drum rests. These are not times of collapse but of breath. In Kush, between the reigns of powerful kings and the rule of venerated queens, there were such interludes, gaps in the record, blank spaces in stone. Dynasties faded not with war or fire, but with silence. A lineage ended, a new one yet to begin, and in between, stillness. The ancient scribes left little to mark these pauses. No proclamations, no fanfare, perhaps no need. For the Kushites understood something we often forget, that silence itself is part of the rhythm. That absence is not erasure, but waiting. During these times, life did not vanish. It continued, quietly. Farmers still planted seeds beneath rising suns. Priests still lit incense. Midwives still cradled newborns and whispered names only the stars would remember. But the temples were subdued. The royal courts emptied of procession. Statues of past rulers watched over empty thrones with a patient gaze. The gods did not weep. They simply watched. It may have been during these pauses that the greatest shifts occurred, not in conquest, but in consciousness. A new language, a new style of crown, a new way of seeing the world. Change rarely comes with noise. It comes like dusk, soft, certain, unnoticed until it is complete. Perhaps it was during such a pause that the script of Meroë began to take shape, not declared by decree, but developed slowly, as hands traced new lines into clay. Perhaps it was in this silence that the lion god Apedmark rose to prominence, his form appearing more frequently in temple walls. Perhaps queens stepped forward not with ceremony but because the moment called them. There is power in such transitions, and just as breath must pause between sentences, so must history pause between voices. We to live in such pauses, at times, moments in our lives when the path is not clear, when the story faltered. But these are not ends. They are beginnings gestating in quiet. So let us honor the spaces between. Let us stand not only in the presence of kings, but in the fields where no name was recorded. Let us find meaning not only in triumph, but in the breath that comes before it. Close your eyes. Feel the hush of the land, the gentle stillness that hums beneath all things. The breath between dynasties was not empty. It was sacred. And in the Kingdom of Kush, silence was never just silence. It was the voice of becoming. Beneath every step, every breeze, every grain of golden dust, memory lives. The desert does not forget. It keeps its stories not in books, but in layers in the shifting folds of sand that move slowly, like breath, over centuries. In Kush, memory was everywhere, and nowhere there were no grand libraries, no marble halls filled with scrolls. But the memory of the kingdom lived in quieter places, in the way a threshold was worn by generations of feet, in the stone grooves where water once trickled, in the soot-darkened ceiling of a smithy long gone. The sand, you see, is both eraser and archivist. It swallows cities, yet preserves their bones. It buries, but it also protects. Beneath it lie potsherds still curved to the palm, arrowheads with fingerprints still pressed into the flint, beads that once clinked gently against the skin of a queen. And as winds move the dunes, these things rise and fall like breath. Archaeologists today dig carefully in those sands, uncovering rooms that have not seen light in 2,000 years. Each trawl stroke is a conversation with time. A brush of dust from a stone reveals a carving. A scrape of metal finds the rim of a bowl once filled with milk or wine or river water. But the sand gives only what it chooses. For most of what Kush was remains unseen. Not because it was lost, but because it has chosen stillness. We are left with fragments. And in fragments, we find wonder. A single inscription on a temple wall, a name that survived. A burial site marked, not with gold, but with a ring placed on bone. A mule half-est, where a lion god still watches with one eye. A footprint, fossilized in clay, left by a child whose name we'll never know. These are not relics. They are echoes. When you walk through the ruins of Kush, the sand shifts beneath your feet with ancient purpose. You are not merely walking over history, you are walking through memory. Every gust of wind is a page turning. Every dune, a chapter waiting to be read. And sometimes, when dusk falls and the sky deepens into violet, the desert glows not from the sun, but from within, as if the sand itself remembers. As if beneath your feet, the people of Kush stir slightly in their sleep and dream of river songs, temple chants, and quiet laughter. So lie still now. Let the memory in the sand rise around you, soft as breath. Let it cover you gently, not in forgetting, but in remembering. Feel the warmth of ages settle into your skin. Kush is not gone. It rests just beneath the surface, listening, waiting, remembering. And tonight, it remembers you. There comes a moment in every kingdom's journey when the flame flickers not extinguished by force, but slowly, softly, like the final ember of a sacred fire choosing its own fading. So it was with Kush. It did not collapse in chaos. It did not vanish in a single day. The way stars fade at dawn, not gone, but hidden by new light. By the 4th century, the once great cities of Meroë and Napata were quieter. The forges cooled. The chants in the temples grew faint. Trade routes shifted. The language Meroitic still undecided. No enemy stood triumphant over Kush. There is no record of a final battle. No tale of fire and ruin. Instead, the kingdom passed like breath, like a lion returning to the tall grass, unseen. Perhaps it was droughts, perhaps it was politics, perhaps it was time, or perhaps Kush had given all it needed to give, and chose to retreat into the memory of the earth, into the hearts of rivers and the hush of sand. Its people did not vanish. They became part of new rhythms, new kingdoms, new stories. But something lingered. Even centuries later, the memory of Kush flickered in the minds of those who dwelt near its ruins. Local legends spoke of buried cities filled with gold, of queens who could speak to stars, of lions who once knelt before crowned women. And then, in time, even these stories dimmed, until silence wrapped the kingdom like linen. But silence is not absence. The flame had not died, it had become internal, a warmth held within the land itself, in the soft winds that sweep the pyramids, in the way the Nile still bends around the places it once blessed. And now, in this moment of this quiet space between dusk and dream, we carry that flame forward. We do not need to resurrect the kingdom to honor it. We need only to remember it, to speak its name with reverence, to let its mysteries live. For Kush was never meant to be known entirely. It was meant to be felt. A kingdom of breath and rhythm, of queens and silence, of gods who waited in stone, of gold that spurred not of wealth, but of memory. And though the world moves forward, the flame of Kush remains, not as fire, but as light in the mind, as warmth in the soul. So rest now, let your breath slow with the wind, let your heart hold the ember, let the last flame of Kush glow in the quiet of your sleep. It will not fade, it will burn softly, forever. And now, gentle dreamer, the sands have stilled, the Nile has quieted, the last lamp in the temple has dimmed. We have walked together through the vanished kingdom of Kush, where gold shimmered not for glory, but for grace, where queens ruled with eyes like riverstone, and gods whispered from lion mouths, where the wind carried memory, and even silence was sacred. You have stood beneath moonlit pyramids, heard the hush of incense rising before forgotten deities, felt the warmth of iron, the shimmer of painted walls. You have drifted through markets, traced the breath of lost children, and touched the shadow of a mirror once held in the hand of a queen. But this, dear listener, is not the end. Kush lives in the folds of your thoughts now. It hums in the quiet between waking and sleep. Its memory moves with you subtle, unseen, like the desert wind that leaves no mark, but shifts the soul. If these ancient echoes stirred something within you, if you found stillness in the sound of vanished temples, then let your presence be known, with the softness of a like, with the grace of a shared word, with the quiet promise of subscription, not to a channel, but to a journey through shadowed time. And if you feel called, tell us, dreamer, from which corner of the night do you listen? What sky holds your stars? What silence cradles your sleep? Let our circle of contemplators expand a constellation of hearts, each one keeping the flame of history alive, not through noise, but through wonder. Until we drift again through forgotten realms, until the next hush of mystery calls, rest now. In the light of Kush, you are not alone. The past is with you, and in this dream it never truly ended. Good night, dreamer of ancient things.